have absolutely everything that there is, every piece of paper, every photograph, every bit of physical evidence.
A grand jury begins hearing evidence in the shooting death of an unarmed black teenager by a white police officer. It could take weeks before the grand jury decides whether charges will be filed against Officer Darren Wilson.
Attorney General Eric Holder arrived in Ferguson today hoping to ease tensions. 51 people were arrested since just yesterday, but officials say it has been much calmer than previous days. Still, protesters say they are not backing down. At times, those protesters have turned things violent with rocks, bottles, even Molotov cocktails thrown at police.
But law enforcement has also been criticized for how they've handled the protests and the equipment used. ABC 6 News reporter John Decott spoke with local law enforcement officials about their use of similar equipment.
Earlier this week, Missouri National Guard troops arrived in Ferguson in Humvees, but increasingly American police departments already have their own military-style vehicles. Earlier this year, the Austin Police Department received this armored Humvee at no cost through a military surplus program.
You could equate this to a piece of mobile body armor.
Olmsted County has a mine-resistant MRAP vehicle similar to this one in Iowa City, and the Star Tribune estimates Minnesota law enforcement agencies have collected over 8,500 pieces of surplus military equipment, drawing stark criticism from many who see the trend as a step in the wrong direction.
Militarized the weapons and the vehicles were never intended to be used in our streets against our citizens.
Chuck Samuelson, head of the Minnesota ACLU, says the mine-resistant vehicles in particular have no place in our society.
The only way for peace officers to function is if they're in the community and they do community policing. This is 180 degrees off from that.
Officials in Austin say they've only used their Humvee a handful of times, including this January standoff that lasted 9 hours. And those in law enforcement say the vehicles merely offer protection and are necessary to keep officers safe.
I can understand when you have a machine that looks like this, but the fact of the matter is it's very similar to body armor that officers are wearing.
Anything that will help us do our job better and protect our officers and the public safety, we want to utilize those assets, and this was one of them.
Police in Mason City also received an MRAP back in April. We also spoke with Rochester Police Chief Roger Peterson, who says it's not an issue of where the equipment comes from, but when and how it's used. He says following those guidelines helps keep them and their officers safe. Reporting live in studio, John Decott, ABC 6 News.